I just want to thank you for your tremendous support. And here it is. If you want to go out and get it, you can go out and get it. Have fun with it. But people do like it, I must say. Thank you very much.
I'm back. And I'm back with another video. This one is going to be called Blacks for Trump. And normally I don't like to say blacks because it's just a personal thing with me. I'd rather say black people, but because what's a black? But anyway, that's the way you have to kind of title things these days. But anyway, I wanted to start this video because I've really been concerned about black people who have decided that they need to be for Trump because they're disillusioned with the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and Biden. And I am not a Democrat. I don't label myself as a Democrat or a liberal. I'm an independent thinker. So this is not about trying to defend or trash one side or the other. I'm only interested in the truth and reality. That's the only thing I've ever been interested in. That's the only thing my videos are ever about. And I don't understand why it is that this generation, the woke generation, wants to identify with Trump because he's been convicted. I mean, I do understand that a lot of black men have been convicted, a lot of black people have been wrongly convicted. And it's kind of like the OJ thing back when OJ was on trial and black people cheered that OJ beat the system because they identified with the fact that, you know, a black man had been, they felt like wrongly convicted, or basically they were trying to set him up, really. And it was a setup. They were trying to set him up. It was obvious that they did try to plant evidence. Anybody who was following the case would know that. But I don't want to get into that. I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm just really making a comparison of black people cheering someone who they can identify with because of the fact that they've been wrongly convicted or attempted to be convicted, wrongly persecuted, indicted by the justice system. But to identify with Trump, of all people, that's the part that really just, I really don't quite get. Trump is a billionaire. Trump is an old white billionaire, and young rappers, one of them I heard even got a tattoo of him on their leg. And he has zero in common with any of them. Zero. We're talking about somebody who said the White House was a dump. And his wife refused to stay there. She stayed in their, I think, in their apartment in New York or somewhere. She would even stay there. It was beneath them. So there's no way, you know, here's Ye, when he was still calling himself Kanye, going to the White House to talk to Trump for a lunch with his MAGA hat on. And that was supposed to have been a big deal because Trump gave him the time of day. And here's Trump saying the White House is a dump. There's no comparison. There's no connection whatsoever that can be made. That's totally delusional. That's number one. Number two, it's as if, has the woke crowd forgotten about the Central Park Five? You know, the 5 innocent black kids that were wrongly convicted for rape, for a gang rape that they didn't commit. And DNA testing cleared them. And then after they were cleared, who was it that still insisted on trashing them, Donald Trump. He came out and said, well, when actually he should have been apologizing, because he even took out, I don't know if y'all remember tonight, he even took out, was kind of like a reward. It was up in the thousands to get them caught or to get them convicted or whatever. I can't remember what it was now, but the bottom line was he was the one leading the charge to have them convicted when this first happened years ago. And after he found out that they were cleared on DNA evidence, he doubled down. He said, well, if they didn't do that, they must have been guilty of something. What was they doing in the park at time of night? That's stereotyping black men in the worst way. And what he said, just like the things that he says these days, ended up causing them to have death threats. Now they're cleared, they're freed, they've been found innocent because of the DNA test, they've been released back in the public, they're trying to get on with their lives, and they had to face death threats just because of what Trump said about the fact that he felt like they were still guilty. And so these idiots that followed Trump made death threats against him. And don't think that this doesn't have anything to do with race. Please don't think for 1 second that this doesn't have anything to do with race. You can't show me any example of where he ever trashed anybody else who is convicted of a crime and caused them to have death threats other than the Central Park Five. You can't show it to me. It's not out there. I can safely say that there isn't anything similar to that out there. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't ever said about locking anybody up. We know he said lock Hillary up. I'm not saying that. I said a situation like the Central Park Five. Because young white guys commit crimes too. When did he ever say anything about trying to get them the maximum penalty? When did he ever trash them and cause them to have death threats? So there's that. And then also there's the history of racism in his family. His father, they say, has ties to the KKK. Now, how true it is, I don't know. But we do know that he did lose a case of housing discrimination against people of color. That is a fact. That's an easily verifiable fact. And I don't bring up things like this, and I don't show you, any proof, because I actually do want you to do your own research. The problem now is a lot of people want everybody else to do the research for them so that they don't have to do it, which is being intellectually lazy. That's the problem. There's so much information floating out here now and so much misinformation, because that's what these algorithms do. They mix the truth with lies. They mix information with misinformation. So that way you can never really know what the truth is. That's just not an accident. So that's the reason why you have to really dig deep. And I only pay attention to articles that are where it's neutral or as close to neutral as possible. It's not biased right or left, and where they're reporting on something that actually happened that you can look up in records and see if it's there. And so he's got that in the back of his history. And also, when he was running the first time, he was endorsed by David Duke and Jared Taylor. David Duke was an I think he was like a grand wizard of the KKK. And he only really, took off his robe and his hood and put on a suit because he said himself they were trying to move the KKK into more mainstream and and change their image, and they wanted to get into law. They wanted to be the judges and the prosecutors and the cops and all that, and they succeeded, by the way. Jared Taylor is a white nationalist who believes that we should be separated and, if anything, probably sent back to Africa. Both of them endorsed him. So when black people ask the question, well, how do you know he's racist? What would make you say that? Was it because you hate him? No. Evidently, racists knows who he is. They know who he is. They're not confused, or they wouldn't be endorsing him. They're not endorsing anybody else, but they endorsed him. Out of all the candidates that were running, he's the one they endorsed. That's number one. And then number two, also when he was running against Biden, you had all these pickups running around town in different places all over America. You've seen the videos. Maybe you weren't paying attention. I don't know, because the one thing I do say about the woke crowd is I say they're woke, but they ain't paying attention. On the back of those pickups, where you saw rednecks running around with their pickup trucks, and they had flags on the back of those pickup trucks, you saw Trump 2020 flags and Confederate flags on the other side of the tailgate. That's what you saw. You either saw just Trump flags, just Confederate flags, but if you saw a Trump flag and a Confederate flag, it would be together on the same pickup. I guess what you didn't see Confederate flags with Biden flags. You didn't see that. I guarantee you didn't see it. So again, you can say all you want to about how racist the Democratic Party is, but the racists know who their allegiance is going to, and it's not Biden, it's Trump. Because along with that, he's also responsible for, any of the racist groups that have sprung up over the years. The racist groups, any of the white supremacy groups, their numbers have gone way up since Trump came on the scene. Because in their minds, he's their hero. They're behind him 150%. Because they believe that he's going to put black people in their place and keep them in their place. That's why. It has nothing to do with the politics. He's not doing a damn thing for them. He hasn't done anything for anybody in that demographic at all. He gave tax cuts to the top 1 to 5%, and most of those rednecks don't qualify. Most of those poor white people, they don't qualify. So he didn't have any policies that's helping them. It's about him keeping us in check. Maybe y'all don't remember that, but when he was on the debate stage with Biden, and he was asked about Black Lives Matter and the alt-right and all that, and he said he was going to make sure that the suburbs were protected. Well, who do you think he was talking about? Now, let's be honest. If somebody mentions urban, the first thing you think of is people of color, usually living in the city. But if you're talking about suburbs, the first thought you think about is somebody white. Let's be honest. So that was code. That was code he was sending out. Just like when they asked him about the Proud Boys and all that, and he said, stand back and stand by. That was code. And that was exactly what they did. They stood back and they stood by until January the 6th, when he released them. And believe me, and I've told a lot of people this, people don't want to listen. People don't want to believe me, but I'll say it to the day I die. January 6th was not about getting the government, not the government. It was not about getting the election overturned. That wasn't it. Trump is not a fool. You don't get to be a billionaire being a fool. He's not a fool. He talks crazy, does a lot of crazy stuff. He's a narcissist. He's a lot of different things, but he's not a fool. And he knows, especially being in the position that he was in after having been the president for 4 years, or basically, he absolutely knew that America does not give in to terrorists. America has never yielded to terrorists, domestic or foreign. America doesn't do that. They don't bargain with terrorists, and they don't give in to terrorists. So there's no way in the world that he could have seriously believed that he could get them to overturn the election by sending that mob to the Capitol. Now, did the people who went there on his behalf believe it? Yeah, they believed it. They were dumb enough to do it. They were dumb enough to storm the Capitol. So yeah, they were dumb enough to believe it. But he didn't believe it. He knew better. That wasn't his goal. His goal was no different than someone who's in the mob, was extortion. It's the same as extortion game. When someone won't cooperate with the mob, they'll send, and if they have a business, let's say for instance, they'll send their goons to the business to trash the business and threaten whoever the person is that they're trying to convince. Threaten them within an inch of their life. And then leave. And then later they get the call from the mob boss, and he's like, hey, if you don't want this to happen again, I suggest you cooperate and do what I tell you to do, or else I'll send them back. That's how that works. And that was exactly what he did on January the 6th. Scared the living shit out of all those congressmen, had everybody running for their lives, had Mike Pence running for his life, gallows out front. That was the whole thing. That was what that was about. Knowing it was going to be televised, knowing how it was going to happen. And he's sitting back looking at it on TV, and they're saying, Mr. Trump, you going to do anything about that? No. Because, the full effect hadn't happened yet. He wanted for them to really feel it. And they did, and it worked. To a point. Now, of course, it didn't do anything at all to slow down the certification. The certification still took place. He knew it couldn't stop the certification. But what it did was, what he wanted them to happen was for people to get so scared, which is what extortion is all about, to the point to where nobody would come after him again. Because he knew they were going to come after him. He knew he had lawsuits pending already. He already had lawsuits pending. And just like Al Capone did back in the day, to intimidate people to the point to where they're scared to testify, scared to prosecute, scared to convict him, that's the whole point of that. And if you've noticed, any of the prosecutors and judges, and even the FBI, even the head of the FBI, they've all received death threats. They've all received death threats. That's extortion. That was the point. And if he doesn't get convicted, that'll be the reason why. It'll be because no jury will be brave enough to convict him, because they'll be afraid of who's going to come after him. That's why they've tried to do everything they could to protect the names of the jurors. And I think they got leaked out. So they're going to, But anyway, I don't want to land too long on that, but that's what that's about. And also, the other thing is that this generation loves to talk about how the Democrats were started by the KKK. Yes, they were. There's a long history of that. But what you need to ask yourself is, why does the GOP, any Republicans or any conservatives that would talk to you about that, why do they have to go back over 100 years to talk about what the Democrats were? Because again, as I said earlier, that's not what it is today. During the time of the Voting Rights Act, that was around the time when the switch came. You can go back and research that. It was back in the 60s, because black people used to traditionally vote Republican. That's who they used to vote for, until they found out that there were people who did not want them to even vote, and some of those people obviously were Republicans. Now, some Republicans, I think, did vote for the bill because Lyndon B. Johnson got them to. But the bottom line is, that was around the time of the switch and around the time of the Kennedys. That's when black people started voting Democrat. And the other thing they like to talk about is, well, the Democrats have been in office all this time, Biden's been in office all this time, and what policies have they brought up that's benefited black people? Which is just so ridiculous of an argument. I hardly know where to begin. Because in the first place, nobody ever challenges them back and says, okay, well, what have Republicans done for black people? Well, just telling me that I can think for myself? That's it? Oh, you can think for yourself. You don't have to let anybody tell you how to think or how to vote. You can think for yourself. Thank you. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Really? That's it? Because they don't have any policies. What policies do they have? While they're telling you the Democrats don't have any policies. So they're basically saying, okay, well, you're a fool for voting Democrat all these years because they've never done anything to help black people. On another video, I went through this. There are a lot of things that help black people that doesn't have black put on it. And the Democratic policies are the ones that created the middle class. Go back and research it. You know, when they strengthened the unions, when they started breaking down color barriers and gender barriers so that black people could make the same kind of money that white people were making. And you have to remember, most black people don't have, especially back at that particular time, because black people love to talk about, oh, how much better we were doing before than we are now. And you know, and the family was together and all that. Well, at that particular time, that was because a black man could get a blue collar job if he was unskilled labor, like my father did. If only had a high school education, you could get a factory job. And it had the pay and the benefits to where the wife didn't have to work. And just like they talk about it all day long now, every day about, oh, the traditional family and the traditional marriage where the man paid all the bills and we don't see that anymore. That's what they had back then. That was because of the Democrats. It was because of the Democratic policies that created that. And nobody benefited more than black people, because you had fewer black people in the upper level. You had fewer black doctors and dentists and lawyers and teachers and small business owners. You had fewer of them than you had the blue collar people. Most of the people were uneducated, unskilled, with just, like I said, basic high school diploma. You know, that's what a lot of the black men had. So in order to take care of their families, those jobs were key. And like I said, they strengthened the union. So, you know, everything from truck drivers to factory workers, they were making great money. Construction workers, all of them, they were making great money and could take care of their families just fine. And you want to talk about policies? The policies that the Republicans have is always deregulation. You know what deregulation stands for? Deregulation stands for taking protections away from working class people. That's what it means. It's great for businesses because that's money that they don't have to spend, that they can pocket. It's great for them, but it does absolutely nothing for the worker. It's the direct opposite. When we had that train derailment not too long ago, that had to do with deregulation. Democrats don't do that. And so, also, when you talk about as far as the way Trump feels about black people compared to how Biden feels about black people. Because I've heard a lot of that too. You know, well, Biden said this 40 years ago, and Biden, he went to a racist funeral and this, that, and the third. I don't doubt any of that. I mean, that's a matter of record. It is what it is. But in terms of people growing, that's what I look at. You can accuse anybody of anything about their past, but how have they grown? What have they grown into over the years? You know, if Biden was that big a racist, if he had not grown, he lost to Obama before he became Obama's VP. They were both on that debate stage. He lost. He was one of the people that lost to Obama, just like Hillary did. And he didn't get his shot to be president back then because of Obama. And then Obama turns around and offers him the vice president. And so here Obama is the first black president, and Biden is so racist that he agrees to be his vice president. Does that even begin to make any sense to you? He's going to play number 2. He's going to be first lieutenant to the first black president. He's going to take that role when he was trying to be president himself. That's how racist he is. And then he turns around and does get elected and elects the first woman of color vice president before we have a first white female vice president. There's never been a white female president. And he is elected because of him, putting her on the ticket with him, got her elected as being the first female woman of color president. Now, I know y'all probably don't care anything about Kamala Harris. You're like, well, what are you telling us that for? Because, she did this and she did that as a DA. That's another thing that really needs to be researched because it's not all what you think. But the bottom line is, I'm talking about a pattern of racism. You cannot talk about something without talking about a pattern. Patterns matter. That is not the pattern of a racist. If he had not changed his mind on some level, I'm not saying he's no longer racist, but if he hadn't changed his mind on some level, if he hadn't grown on some level, could he have really done that? And I'm like, oh yeah. And you're like, okay, yeah, well, he got her because he wanted to get the black vote. Okay, well, what was the advantage of being Obama's vice president? What was the advantage to him to do that? He wanted to be president. He didn't want to be vice president. He wasn't running for vice president. He was trying to be president. It was only after he lost to Obama that he had to end up selling for vice president. And it wasn't like he couldn't say no. He could have said, hell no. You think I'm going to be your president? That's what a racist would have said. You think I'm going to be your vice president? Just imagine if it was Trump. Can you imagine him saying, you think I'm going to be your vice president? Hell no. So, on the other hand, all the votes that Trump wanted to get thrown out in Georgia and some other places in these counties those counties were predominantly black people. The votes that he wanted thrown out were black people's votes. Those are the votes he wanted to get counted, get thrown out. And the Republicans have done everything they could to try and make sure that they made everything as difficult for black people in those counties to vote as possible, shutting down voting polls. You know, they have threatened pollsters. Again, like I said, with the death threats that came basically from Trump, threatened pollsters, threatened them with, having them making it to where it was more difficult for them to vote. Didn't even want them to have water. When they said, oh, we're going to give them water and snacks because they're in line in basically 100-degree weather waiting for hours because they've shut down these other voting polls. So they didn't really have any choice. And they'd be in there in the line for hours, and they didn't even want them to have water. These were Republicans that did it, not Democrats. Republicans. This is who you're turning to. It's like I said, I can understand not being for the Democrats. I can understand the Democrats have let us down. I can understand the Democrats lied. All politicians lie, basically. So I can understand all that. But I don't understand looking at Trump and the Republicans as an alternative. That's where I get lost in the sauce. I don't get that. How are they an alternative? How are people who basically cannot stand black people and have been more responsible for most of the racist stuff that we've seen? I can guarantee you most of the people who've been the Karens that you've seen in videos that have not wanted black people to be able to come in their own apartment where they live at, not wanting them barbecuing in the park, questioning them like they're the cops, questioning people going into their own homes because they didn't want them living in the neighborhoods. I guarantee you none of those people are liberals. That's a conservative mindset. And that's because of Trump. Trump is the one that has empowered these people into thinking that they can act that way toward black people now. And I'm sure you can find some cases where maybe they weren't conservative or they weren't Republicans, but I'll guarantee you the majority of them were. Because that's not how Democrats act. That's not how liberals en masse act toward black people. They're not the ones that do that. And that's not to say that every Republican is racist. No, not every Republican is racist. Not every conservative, someone can identifies as a conservative, is racist. No, they're not. I never said that. All I'm saying is, if you're going to make a comparison, how can you say that the other side is safer? And it makes sense to be on that side. That's all I'm saying. I just don't see how the right is an alternative from the left. Because I'll be honest with you, it doesn't even make sense anyway that we have a two-party system to begin with. But that's another rabbit hole I don't want to go down. But anyway, that's about all I'm going to say in this segment. I will be back later. And I would appreciate it if you have any comments, leave some comments or like the video. Thank you.